Hello everyone, Gregg Braden here. Welcome to this week's edition of our questions and answers. I'm going to do something a little bit different this week. I'm really excited about this. We have been inundated, my office, my staff, we've been inundated with questions from so many different perspectives, but they're all pretty much asking the same thing. And it is about an outer technology. We've spent so much time talking about our inner technology. This is a question, these questions are all about our outer technology, about the global financial system, about Bitcoin, about what cryptocurrencies are, what they mean in our lives. What I'll say right now before I get in this presentation is that Bitcoin specifically is a disruptive technology. It is an advanced disruptive technology that has the potential to level the playing field when it comes to global finances for all the reasons I'm about to share. Because it's disruptive, it is being given a lot of bad press in the mainstream media through what is called FUD, F-U-D, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. So you will see articles that Bitcoin is a scam, Bitcoin is a stock, Bitcoin is a pyramid scheme. And I'd like to address all those. We've had questions on those individually. I want to address them. But I'm just going to say, we're moving into a new world. There's a new world emerging. It's not quite here yet because we are building it through the choices that we make in our lives. And so much of our lives have gone into a digital platform. Certainly all of our music is, our writing, books, our personal correspondence to one another, our life's history, our family's photographs. Everything is digitized. It makes sense that we would be seeing an evolution in money. And not just money that we exchange with one another, but the idea underlying money. And this is a deeply spiritual principle that I want to address because money is all about energy. It's all about the energy that you and I put out into the world for the things that we create and the services that we provide and the information and the knowledge that we share. And it's about the way that that energy comes back to us, the modalities of that energy. It's fascinating, really interesting. So I'm going to invite you to think about it from this perspective. It's more than just about money. But I want to maybe offer some perspectives about money that will shed new light on this disruptive technology and hope to answer some of your questions. I'm going to say right off the bat, this is not financial advice. It cannot be because I am not a financial advisor. So what I'm going to share with you is what I've come to understand. I've done a lot of research over the last 10 years. I had to understand this for myself to make sense of what's happening in the world. And it is more than just finances because finances are a reflection of mass investor psychology, and mass investor psychology follows natural rhythms, natural cycles, and it's us. So it is a psychological process that is playing out through the exchange of energy in our world. And when you begin to look at it from that perspective, it's pretty cool. Really, really fascinating. So let's get right into the questions. I'm going to delve into Bitcoin specifically in this episode to lay the foundation, and then in future episodes, I will go into additional facets of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, decentralized finance, layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 protocols, all of that for people that are interested. But I wanted to be very specific in this video. So let's get into this video on Bitcoin specifically. And I'm going to begin with the first and most obvious question. What is Bitcoin? Wow, we could probably do an entire program just answering and responding to all of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that's out there in the world right now. So what I'm going to say to you, Bitcoin is not a stock, although you will hear it discussed in financial newsletters and Yahoo Finance and all the financial channels. There were advertisements, commercials for Bitcoin in the Super Bowl recently during halftime. It is not a stock. It is not a security. So it is not something that you would think of the way you would think of shares in a company like Microsoft or Apple or Tesla or something like that. It's not even a physical coin. So often you will see people in the advertisements holding up a physical Bitcoin as a representation, but in truth, it is not even a physical coin. What is Bitcoin then? If it's not those things, what is it? Well, I mentioned this just a moment ago. Bitcoin is a highly advanced technological solution to the problems and the disparities of today's money, the way that we deal with money and what money means to us and our families. Bitcoin is an advanced engineering solution, and one of the reasons that it was designed and one of the things that it can do is to end the suffering of people who have no control over their own currency. And I'm going to talk about this in more detail because there are things happening with your money and with my money we take for granted. Some of it we are not even aware of, possibly. And all that is about to change. And it has to, because we become a globalized world. And so the money that is used in exchange for our goods and services and knowledge and information has to change as well. In December of 2017, the United States SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, made a legal determination that Bitcoin is not a stock, that it falls into a category that is called an asset, and specifically an intangible asset. Now, this is important. If you engage in Bitcoin, it determines how it's taxed, how it's regulated, and what it means to you. So it is an intangible asset. Now, I want to be really clear. Although it's intangible, doesn't mean that it doesn't have value, because Bitcoin has an immense, what's called an intrinsic value that I'm going to discuss in this program. But this is one of the pieces of FUD. What you hear people often say that don't understand this technology, they'll say, well, it has no real value, no intrinsic value. Boy, nothing could be further than the truth. And I want to share that with you. So Bitcoin, it's not a physical coin. It lives in cyberspace. It lives on the World Wide Web, distributed on the World Wide Web. And I don't want to get into the technical aspects in this video. I will in others. But it is what is called a layer 1 or a base protocol in a global distributed network. And that's going to be important here in just a little while, a layer 1. What Bitcoin really is, when you get down to it, is a unique digital address that is between 26 and 35 characters long. And let me show you an actual Bitcoin address. This is what the Bitcoin looks like, but you would never use this address when you are buying or selling or exchanging. What you do is you use private keys. There's a private key that you use for yourself, and there are public keys that you use when you transmit, because if you have that address, that means you have the coin, you own that asset. And when you're making a payment for something, you don't want to be sharing the information for your personal, your personal Bitcoin. So where did it come from? Who invented it? This is really fascinating to me because the answer is we really don't know. There's a lot of speculation out there. The truth is we don't know. There was a public court case, there was a court case that was partially made public at the end of last year, early this year in 2022, where a man claimed that he was the inventor of Bitcoin. And the court ruled in his favor, although the proof did not come down the way that you would expect that proof to come down, and he was awarded a financial sum. Bitcoin has very mysterious origins. It was actually developed in response to the financial crash, to the crash of the housing system and the banking system in 2007. And it was developed in response to that so that that could never happen again. And the white paper describing it was released on Halloween, actually October 31st of 2008. Financial crash went from 07 technically into 09. The paper, and you can see this paper, you can Google it, you can read it on the internet. It's titled Bitcoin, a Peer-to-Peer Electronic Cash System. And it was developed under a pseudonym of Satoshi Nakamoto. Satoshi Nakamoto. What we do not know is if Satoshi Nakamoto is an individual, if it is a consortium of individuals. There is speculation that it could have been a government. There is speculation it could have been an intelligence agency. The truth is that we don't know. Well, there's a lot of speculation out there. But this is the paper that Satoshi Nakamoto released. And it's not a highly technical paper, but it lays out the essence of this technology. What it essentially was saying was that the problems with money could be solved through this technological solution. I'm going to go into those problems here in just a moment. Why is Bitcoin important? This is one of the questions that come to me a lot. It's important because global economies and global finances are evolving. And Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, digital currencies are the next step in the evolution of money and finance. Now, it may not always be Bitcoin, but it is the front runner right now. It is the most advanced and the furthest in this technology. So before we can talk about the problems that Bitcoin is solving, let's talk about money in general. First of all, what is it? And I'm surprised how many people I've done an experiment. I asked people in the local grocery store or at the gas station when I'm filling up my tank, what is money? And they'll pull out a dollar bill and they'll say, this is money. Well, that is a representation of an idea of money. But when it comes right down to it, money, economists tell us that there are three primary functions of money, and they all have to do with energy. Let me identify them, and then we'll look into each one individually. Money is a medium of exchange for energy. Money is a store of value for energy. Money is a common measure of value for energy. And the energy we're talking about here is the energy that you expend or that you receive in exchange for your energy. So let's just talk about this. Money is a medium of exchange for energy. When we need goods, when we need services, or when we need information or knowledge, these are the kinds of things that we exchange energy for so that we can receive these. So if you are creating, if you work in the grocery store, if you work in a restaurant, if you're a teacher, you're teaching information, you're receiving energy for the information that you share with your students in the form of a paycheck. If you are working at an hourly service or you have a paycheck that you get once a month, that paycheck is energy coming back to you in exchange for the energy, your time, your life energy that you've expended to produce something, some good or some service. So I invite you to think about this because it applies to everything, whether you're developing software in Silicon Valley or you're working in a resort hotel in the ski area in Lake Tahoe, whether you're an author writing books or whether you are a speaker on the public circuit, if you're a musician, all of those things revolve around us expending our life energy, putting our life energy out into the universe, and we're being compensated for that with another kind of energy. That energy that we're being compensated with is a store of value. You want the energy coming back to you to be in a form that you can hold on to indefinitely, because you can't use all the energy coming back to you in the moment it comes back to you. So you want to be able to store that energy coming back to you in exchange for what you have given, and you want to be able to redeem it at the time of your choosing, whether it's a minute from now or a year from now or a decade from now. So it's a store of value, and you want that energy to be a common measure of value, something that is accepted and recognized over time. So if money is coming back to you, that energy is coming back to you, and you are saving it for your children's education. You want that energy that you've expended and you're now being compensated for, you want that energy to be preserved for your children's education when they need it. That might not be for 10 or 15 or 20 years. So you want it standardized and you want it in a form that's accepted over time. Now, economists also identify 6 properties that they attribute to money. And when you think about them, they make perfect sense. They are durability, portability, divisibility, limited supply, uniformity. All right, these are these are 5 properties. Okay, these are 5 properties, and I'm going to apologize for this. I had 6 originally. I chose to go with these 5. So durability, portability, divisibility, limited supply, and uniformity. All right, so all of that makes sense. Let me give you some examples of imperfect money from the past, because we've used all kinds of money. in the history of our civilizations. There are some cultures that have used things like wampum beads. Indigenous cultures have used wampum beads for a unit of exchange. When you think about the six or the five principles, they may not always be uniform. They may not always be accepted in all cultures. They may not always be easily divisible. So did it work? Yes. Was it perfect? It had its problems. Cowrie shells from nature have been used as a monetary unit of exchange, and the same thing. Different sizes, they're not really divisible. How portable are they? Well, I guess if you want a pocket full of seashells, you can take these with you wherever you go. Copper coins began being used because they were a little bit more standardized in some of the Asian countries. Romans began using coins made of precious metals. But look at the metals. They were imperfect coins because they were not made stamped. Each coin was made individually, and those coins, because they were made of precious metals, they could be shaved. And this has happened commonly. The edges could be shaved so that the person holding the coin get a little bit of gold from one coin, a little bit from another, and pretty soon they had some gold. And this is why, and in many currencies, including American coins, they began putting serrations on the edge, or the little ridges on the edge, so that they can't be whittled down the way that the Romans did. Gold is a form of money. It's an imperfect form of money. It's not really all that portable. And there are a lot of problems that come up with gold that we're going to talk about here in just a few moments. Paper money is what we're using right now, and there are problems with this as well. So I'm going to go through. Let's compare. How does a digital Bitcoin compare to a physical US dollar along these criteria, the criteria of durability, portability, divisibility, limited supply, and uniformity? Well, let's just do this really quick. The US dollar and you can say this for the euro, you can say it for the Canadian dollar, for the Australian dollar, for the Japanese yen. You can say this. It is durable. So a paper dollar lasts, the average paper dollar, I think, is in circulation around 15 months. Larger bills are exchanged less, so they last a little bit longer. And there are bills that have been out there for many, many years. So it is durable. It is uniform. And we can say that with certainty, that the paper money is definitely uniform in size. That's why they fit into a billfold nicely or into your purse. Then we begin to run in some places where it's not so ideal. Portability. How portable is American currency? Well, for small amounts, maybe it's no big deal. You carry a little bit around in your billfold. But if you want to transport $1 million and you want to transport that physically, that can be a problem. There are places now where you're not allowed to transport your $1 million in the United States. Something called capital controls are in effect, where if you try to withdraw more than a certain amount out of your bank, you may be prohibited. You will definitely be required to fill out forms about who you are and where that money is going and things like that. So it can be portable. It's not easy. Divisibility, it's limited to 100 cents per US dollar. So it is divisible within that limit. The big problem is that for money to be valued, it has to be in limited supply. And that is where the big problem is coming in for most currencies in the modern world today. So let me talk about this just a little bit. There was a time, and this is before some of you I know were even born, there was a time when the US dollar was backed by gold. It was called the gold standard. And what that meant was every $1 was backed by 1 ounce of gold at a fixed price. This began right after World War II, when the Allied powers put together an economic system for the world. There's a whole history behind that. July 22nd, 1944, the dollar was backed by gold until August 15th, 1971. Let me tell you why that's important. Because when the dollar was backed by gold, you could never have more dollars in circulation than you had gold behind the scenes to back it up. And they used to be called certificates, gold and silver certificates. I remember when I was a kid, I had $1 bills, And at the top, they said silver certificate. And I could take it down to the bank and I could give them my paper and they would give me an ounce of silver. They give me a silver dollar. 1971, all of that stopped. President Nixon, then President Nixon, decoupled the US dollar from gold. And when he did that, he changed the financial system of the world and the monetary system of the world in the US. And we are now paying the price for that. So up until that time, every dollar was backed by an ounce of a precious metal. Right now, without that precious metal, we have what is called a fiat currency since 1971. And what fiat means, it means there's nothing backing it up. It is by agreement, by trust. We trust that the United States government is good for this currency. So in the old days, rather than carrying around a pocket full of gold coins, it was much easier to carry the paper. You'd exchange the paper, but everybody knew behind that paper there was gold backing it, and you could redeem your paper for that gold at any time. People rarely did it, but you could. That has not been possible since 1971. It's just trust. Trust that the United States government is responsible with their economy, responsible with their finances, responsible with their currency. It's called fiscal responsibility. Let me show you what has happened. This is an amazing chart. This is from what is called the U.S. Federal Reserve Economic Data, or it's abbreviated as FRED. It's a FRED chart. And what you're looking at as you go from left to right is called the money supply. Money is measured M1, M2, M3, different levels of the currency that is available in the U.S. in the U.S. economic system. And what you can see is that, look at right after 1971, right on the 70 would be on the left-hand side of the screen, there was a creep. So that the money supply began to creep up. It was being printed, and it could be because there didn't have to be backed by anything. You didn't have to have gold to back the dollar. Well, that has increased, and beginning right around 2008, 2010, we saw a little blip. And from that time, we have gone into an economic policy, unprecedented, where we're printing the money and there's nothing to back it. And look at how much there is that's out there right now. And you say, okay, so we got a lot of money. What's the problem? Well, the problem is, intuitively, you can think about this. The problem is the more money that's out there, the less valuable each element of that money becomes. All right, the more dollars there are that are out there, the more diluted the value of each individual dollar becomes. This is a chart showing from dollars existed before 1944 and after 1944, when we went on to the gold reserve standard. You can see on the chart here what was happening. What I want you to see from this, the primary thing right now, is that in the early part of the 20th century, when a dollar was worth a dollar, it is now worth about 10 cents. Your dollar has lost 90% of its value since the inception of the dollar. Now, we don't always think about it that way, but what you do know is that everything costs more. We say it's inflation that's going on, and so everything costs more. I wish the prices would come down. Well, I'm going to offer you a little bit different way to think about it. The prices don't change. What changes is that the amount of dollars it takes to buy a tank of gas, or the amount of dollars it takes to buy a bag of groceries, because the dollar is so diluted, it's only worth a tenth of what it was in the early part of the last century. It takes more dollars to equate the energy for the same thing. So yes, it looks to us like the prices are going up, but in truth, when we get really serious about this, it's because the value of our currency is being depleted. It's going down. Right now, we're in big trouble. I'm going to talk about this because the inflation right now, this is now February of 2022, is where it was back in the 1980s. We're looking at about 7% officially. Unofficially, there are other liabilities that probably put it much higher than that, but officially 7.5%. What that means is for every $1 that you have in a savings account or in a bank, that $1 is taking a hit of 7.5%. So you're actually losing value for your money simply by saving your money, because the inflation is stealing that value. All right, so what does that mean in terms of Bitcoin? How does Bitcoin stack up in terms of all of these five criteria? Well, let's look at durability. It is durable as long as there's an internet. And I'm going to talk about this in just a few moments as well, because there are downsides. I want to be very honest and very clear. Downsides to Bitcoin as well. It is durable and it is uniform. It's durable because it's hosted on the World Wide Web, and as long as there is a World Wide Web, it is durable. It is uniform in the sense that the criteria put out in Nakamoto's paper defines very clearly what the parameters are for the Bitcoin. It is portable, and this is turning out to be invaluable right now, because if you are a refugee in a war-torn country, if you are running from a natural disaster and don't have time to go into, or maybe you can't get to the room in a family safe where you keep your valuables, or maybe you're in a country that has undergone economic sanctions and the banks are closed and the banks won't give you your own money, Bitcoin addresses all of that. If you have a mobile phone, if you have a smartphone and access to the internet or a satellite, you can run across that border in the safety of another country with your family, and you have your family's wealth and finances. Divisibility. This is interesting. When Nakamoto put Bitcoin together, each single Bitcoin can be subdivided into 100 million units that are called Satoshis, or sats for short. You hear Bitcoin enthusiasts talking about their sats, stacking their sats. So it is much more divisible than the dollar. Limited supply. Bitcoin, according to the algorithm that Nakamoto created, and he thought this through very, very, very well, or he or she or they, whoever it is, only 21 million Bitcoin will ever be created through a process that is called mining. I'm not going to go into the mining right now, but if you want to know where Bitcoin comes from, it is the product of a complex computer algorithm and a problem, a complex problem that must be solved every 10 minutes by specialized machines to update the entire global network. This is how the security and the transmissibility and the transparency is maintained. And the reward for going through that mathematic algorithm is it's rewarded in Bitcoins. So this is how new Bitcoins appear. Only 21 million will ever be made. And listen to this, 18 million of those are already in circulation in private possession, or in the possession of countries, or in the possession of funds. 18 million have already been created over these last, since the inception of Bitcoin. So it actually meets the criteria much better than the dollar, this digital currency. It solves the problem, Bitcoin solves the problem of durability, portability, divisibility, limited supply, and uniformity. So there are upsides. These are the upsides. Bitcoin is unprecedented in transparency, and this is where the value comes in, the intrinsic value. Bitcoin produces, and I'm going to go into this a little bit more detail in just a moment, it produces and carries a transparent record called a ledger of every transaction that precedes the current transaction. So it is impossible to hide a false transaction. It's impossible to lie. It's impossible to steal directly from the Bitcoin network. Now, we've heard about some very high-profile thefts that have happened. They did not break the security of Bitcoin itself. They were stolen from the platform that was being used to buy, sell, and trade. The theft, the hijacking, was coming from essentially an online platform like a bank. It did not come from the Bitcoin technology itself. All right? Scarcity. If you have only 21 million that are ever going to be created, and there are over 8 billion, approximately 8 billion people on the planet, you can do the math. This will become a very scarce asset very quickly. And As it becomes more in demand, it becomes more scarce, the price will continue to increase. It has unprecedented security. The platform that Bitcoin is actually on, it's called a blockchain, and I have not used that word yet because I'm going to define it in a few minutes. But the blockchain that Bitcoin is part of right now, it is one of the most secure, if not the most secure, blockchain known to exist. Now, anything digital at some point probably can be hacked. As a former senior computer systems designer, I can tell you that. It is very, very difficult, and because of the global distributed network that hosts Bitcoin, it makes it even more difficult. So I won't say it's impossible. I will say it is highly, highly unlikely that it is going to be hacked. Bitcoin represents an unprecedented store of value. Here's what I mean by that. There are people that say it's a scam, it's a pyramid scheme, that it's in a bubble. Well, it's been around for a little over 10 years now. Bitcoin in 2010 was 8 cents per Bitcoin. 11 years later, Bitcoin right now is 68,000 US dollars for one Bitcoin. There are no other assets that I'm aware of that have held that kind of value over that kind of time. Now, does it go up and down on a daily basis? Is it volatile? You bet it is. It is probably the most volatile asset that I've ever seen, with tremendous swings in a daily session, throughout the day, because Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are traded 24/7, 365. They're not limited to the hours of the U.S. stock market or the Asian markets. So tremendous volatility. And one of the benefits is that it is accessible through the internet. All right, so that is a plus in the sense that if you are a refugee or you're running from a disaster or you want to transport billions of dollars from point A to point B, you don't have to have pallets full of money. You don't have to go through a centralized bank with delays and all kinds of paperwork and the potential of problems of losing money or having it confiscated in those processes. Because it is all done on the internet, that can also be a drawback, and I'm going to talk about that right here. The downside is that Bitcoin is confined to the internet. So here's the thing: as long as we have an internet, then it is accessible. If for some reason the internet ever went down, and I don't think, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but it certainly is a possibility. If Earth took a direct hit from an asteroid, if Earth took, these are black swan events, if an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP, brought down large portions of infrastructure, it could be hard to get to your life savings if it's all tied up in Bitcoin. And that's why you don't want all of your life savings tied up in Bitcoin. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. So the fact that it is electronic is an upside, but it can also be a downside. And as I mentioned, it is right now, it is extremely volatile because it is a new technology and it's undergoing a process called price discovery. We've never seen an asset like this. This has never happened. We're witnessing the birth of a revolution in digital economy and digital finance. You're witnessing it on a daily basis. And it's because of that it is undergoing what's called price discovery, which also looks like whiplash if you're looking at a daily chart, where it can gain and lose thousands of dollars in a matter of minutes. So that in a short term is very volatile. But then when you average it out over a long period of time, it actually does very, very well compared to the S&P 500, to the Dow, to gold, to silver. Bitcoin outperforms all of those. If you compare any of those assets or any of those securities over 10 years to Bitcoin, you can see what has happened. From 8 cents to $68,000, nothing else has had that kind of an increase. This is the reason, because the volatility, it's probably not going to be an everyday currency. You're probably not going to go buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks with Bitcoin. Now, some people don't like it when I say that. And it may be that at some point in the future that it happens when it becomes more stable. As Bitcoin has greater adoption, as it is being accepted by more and more companies, more and more countries, and plays a greater role, then that volatility will begin to decrease, and that the charts will begin to average out, is what I'm going to say. You won't see those huge swings, and we're already seeing evidence of this. The time between these huge swings is getting longer and longer and longer as it's being adopted by nations, by massive corporations. I'm going to talk about all those in just a few moments. So think of it more as a store of value rather than as an everyday currency. What makes this technology possible? Well, I alluded to this just a few moments ago. It's a new, relatively new technology that makes peer-to-peer currency possible. We've never had this. We've always had to go through some centralized organization that manages, regulates, in some cases does not honor our relationship to the money. We've always had to go through a central bank or a local bank, or there's always been transaction fees. There have always been delays, a 3-day delay because of settlements, because a third party has to go through this process. This technology changes all of that. It's called blockchain technology. Now, I love this concept for a number of reasons, and I'm going to be as brief as I can, but I'm really excited about this. Because you've heard me talk about how external technology mimics us, our cells and our bodies and our nervous system. The internet mimics a neural network, for example. There are technologies outside of us that mimic the immune system within us. So when your immune system's compromised, it's good to have those. And if you have a good immune system, maybe you don't need those. There are technologies that grow tissue and organs outside of us that mimic the way that our stem cells and our bodies regenerate. I'm saying this because blockchain technology mimics the way that nature stores information in our DNA. Every strand of DNA in your body contains a record of all of the mutations that led to that current strand. Well, you can think of those mutations as transactions. They are genetic transactions. So every strand of DNA has a record of every transaction throughout time, from 200,000 years ago when we showed up on this planet. Those mutations are all recorded in the DNA, and we can reverse engineer and go back and see what those mutations are. That same principle applies to blockchain technology. Instead of DNA mutations, these are the financial transactions. Every transaction that transpired before the one that you're looking at on your screen in your bit chain is in what is called that blockchain. That's the value. No other technology can store a record that cannot be in some way corrupted. A bookkeeper or a banker or a CPA, hopefully they do not, but we all know there are times when their records, for whatever reason, are either mistaken or corrupted. The value of a blockchain technology is that cannot happen. We've never had a transparent technology like that before. And it isn't happening only in one place. Every node, so if you have blockchain, Bitcoin on your computer, you are a node. So every node on the planet has access to the entire blockchain of information that leads up to the Bitcoin that you have in your possession. All right, there are no secrets, and some people like that, some people don't like that. Now, I want to be really clear. Blockchain, Bitcoin can be traced, absolutely. It can be traced for this reason, because it is transparent. You can and this is how people have been caught laundering Bitcoin. They thought that it was untraceable. That's not true. You can absolutely trace it because everything is transparent. It keeps everybody clean and honest. It should. So this blockchain technology, it is revolutionizing finance, as you can imagine, because the middle person is no longer needed. The central banks are no longer needed. Your local banks are no longer needed. You can use them, but you become your own banker. You become responsible for your own funds. You become responsible for how those funds are used, and that's going to be one of the advantages that I'm going to share with you right now. One of the questions, these are all questions that have come to me. So I'm every time you see this slide, it's one of the questions that has come to my office. Why do we need something like Bitcoin now? Well, blockchain technology is the reason we couldn't have done this 20 years ago, because we didn't have the sophisticated internet and blockchain then that we have now. So it's only possible now, and I think it's probably no mistake, because it's possible, often also happens to be the time that we need it probably the most. Why do we need something like Bitcoin? Maybe it's not Bitcoin, maybe it's something else. But right now, Bitcoin is in the lead. Why do we need it right now? We need it because our global financial system is in big trouble in a way that we've never seen before. Bitcoin can solve the problem if it is allowed. So let me just talk about this briefly. The global financial system, it's based upon the US dollar. After World War II, the world adopted the dollar because they trusted America to be fiscally responsible with our money. In recent years, after the financial crisis in 07, 08, and 09, new policies were put in place that the world had never seen. One of those is called quantitative easing, and the other one is simply printing unprecedented amounts of money. Quantitative easing is the government buying debt. Right now, that is happening at the rate of 120 billion US dollars per month. 120 billion dollars. The government is buying in the debt. They're putting that money back into the system, printing that money. Every dollar that is printed and put back into the system is diluting the value of the dollars that you hold. So you can figure this out. 120 billion a month. How long can that happen before your currency is worthless? Well, we can look at other countries in the past. Venezuela is a perfect example of where this happened within our recent memory, where people were, needed boxes to carry their currency to buy a loaf of bread, or we all have seen pictures in Weimar, Germany, of the hyperinflation, where wheelbarrows full of paper money were used to, buy a loaf of bread or a quart of milk or something like that, because the currency becomes so weak, it takes so many more units of currency to exchange the energy for the same thing. We have a debt-based global economy. Our global economy is based on debt, unprecedented debt. Western nations are bankrupt right now. They owe more than they're producing. If that were you and me, we would have to declare bankruptcy, but nations get away with this up to a point. And now it's coming back to bite us. So here's what's happening. The printing of the US dollar is diluting the value of the dollar to such a degree it's causing inflation. All right, inflation is where it looks like everything costs more money. Interest rates have been pretty much near zero since the financial crash 07, 08, 09. One of the ways to remedy this is the Federal Reserve needs to start, and the banks need to start raising the interest rates. Well, here's the problem. All of that debt is based on interest rates that are near zero. Once you start increasing the interest on those debts, some of those debts cannot be repaid. They become unserviceable. If you owe $1,000, maybe it's no big deal. If you owe a few $billion and now the interest rate becomes 1 or 2% on that $1 billion, you can do the math, and it's going to cause problems that will be rippling through the global economy. All right. The US dollar right now, it requires this centralized accounting, a centralized ledger, if you will. And it requires trust. We have to trust our financial managers, even though sometimes they may demonstrate they're not worthy of that trust. Our currency right now can be manipulated, and it is. It's being manipulated through inflation. It's that 7.5% inflation is like a tax on every one of your dollars because your dollar buys 7.5% less. And it hasn't stopped there. It's going to continue. Our dollar is weaponized right now. And here's what I mean by that. When you put your money into a bank, that bank can do whatever it wants to do with your money. It can lend that money to other people. It can lend it to other countries. It can invest in stocks, in technology, in resources that you may not really want to support with your money. So the money you put into your bank can be used for war. It can be used to finance wars. It has been. The wars in Iraq, Afghanistan. It can be weaponized because now any other individual or any nation that is using the US dollar, if they do something that our government is not happy with, our government being the US government, then they can experience sanctions. And the sanctions usually hurt the people that can afford to be hurt the least. It hurts the everyday person. It doesn't hurt the rich people in the corporations and the governments. So the money can be weaponized. Right now, the US is implementing capital controls. You can only take so much out of the bank before you have to report it. Only so much, you're limited in what you can leave the country with. And there's a lot going on around that. Bitcoin solves these problems. It is decentralized. It doesn't have to go through a central authority. You can send money directly to your kids without going through Western Union, where there is a fee. You can send what are called remittances. Talk about this in a moment, but many people come to America to work and send money back to their families. However, the methods of getting that money are taxed, and there are fees, and the family gets a considerable percentage less than what was actually sent to them. All right? Bitcoin is transparent, so it can't be manipulated. People can't lie to us about what's happening with our money. Bitcoin, because it's peer-to-peer, it's you and me and whoever else wants to use it, it's not going to be used to finance a war halfway around the world. It is portable. It is accessible 24/7. It is secure. It is transparent. It is traceable. Bitcoin solves the major problems that have caused the wars in the past. It optimizes those remittance fees and it eliminates the delays. You don't have to wait 3 days for your family to get the money you send back if you're an agricultural worker in California, for example, or in Colorado or New Mexico. Why is Bitcoin called the currency of peace? I've just given you some of the reasons, but this is a question that comes to me. Some people call it a spiritual currency, some call it a currency of peace. It's called a currency of peace because it is an advanced technology that solves the problems that lead to the suffering and the poverty and the discrepancies and wars of the past. It levels the playing field of global finance and personal finance. It is also disruptive to the status quo, and because of that, you're hearing a lot of bad things about it. So I'm trying my best to give you an objective look at what Bitcoin is specifically. It is a specific example of what's called cryptocurrency, even though it's not truly a currency. It's more of a store of wealth. It's a currency of peace because it is not run or owned by a nation. Now think about this. When a nation owns the money, the nation has a monopoly on that money, and the nation can make the laws and the rules around everyone that's agreed to use that money. It's exactly what's happening with the dollar right now. Many wars, when you get right down to the reason for the wars, it's usually about money and it's about disparity. It's about inequality of who has, who hasn't. Bitcoin ends those disparities because it cannot be manipulated and used as it has in the past. Now, where are we going with this? There is, I think, a very good possibility to keep the US dollar alive and to keep it meaningful in the world, that it will have to go back on some standard. Some people speculate the gold standard may come back. My guess is that we would probably go to a digital standard before we go to a gold standard. And if we do, Bitcoin is in the lead for that. I'm not saying it will happen, and I'm certainly not an economist. This is, I research a lot. I got my finger in a lot of pulses and a lot of different communities in the world. And there are rumblings for this happening sooner than later. America going to a digital dollar, and that digital dollar being backed by something that is scarce, that is transparent, and Bitcoin right now is in the lead for that. If that happens, it may also become the world reserve currency. So it doesn't mean that we're going to take Bitcoin again and go down and buy a pizza or a Starbucks. That would be done in local currency, but that local currency that is convenient would be backed by the local digital currency, would be backed by something that actually has some substance. And Bitcoin right now is in the lead for all of that. So I want to share this with you. December 4th, 1921, Henry Ford, the inventor of the Ford automobile and a lot to do with the internal combustion engine and all of those things, he made a statement that was printed in the New York Tribune, December 4th, 1921. And what he said was that he would replace gold with energy currency and to stop all of the wars in the world. Now think about where he was in 21. World War I had happened, World War II hadn't happened yet, but he could see the problems with money. And here's the newspaper article right here if you want to see. I've highlighted what he said. Henry Ford was a visionary. He was ahead of his time. And what he's talking about then, 100 years later, this is 2022 now, so 101 years later is coming to fruition. He was just ahead of his time. So digital finance, it is an unstoppable trend. So for those people that say this is a flash in the pan, for those people that say this is a fad, it's a bubble, I understand why they would say that, and it may look that way in some respects, a pyramid scheme. When they look deeper and really take the time to understand that this is a technology that is solving one of the most hideous problems that leads to the poverty and the suffering and the war that we've experienced in our memory of hundreds of years, our hundreds of years of memory, then I think they begin to look at it a little bit different. All right, so the last thing I want to say, people are asking me these questions. I'm not a financial advisor, so I cannot answer this question with a yes or no. Should we put our savings and our retirement and our kids' educational fund into Bitcoin? I can't answer that. But what I will say is this, I'm going to caution you, Bitcoin is new. It's only been around a little over a decade. It is being widely adopted right now by wealth management funds. Fidelity is BlackRock, the big wealth management funds. Corporations are adopting Bitcoin right and left. Square, Tesla, MicroStrategies, Michael Saylor is a big proponent of Bitcoin. Most major financial companies are adopting Bitcoin right now. Nations are adopting Bitcoin. El Salvador was the first to adopt Bitcoin as legal tender, and it has changed that country. The crime rate has decreased. Business is flocking to El Salvador with new business, new projects. Ukraine has adopted this. Russia now has agreed that Bitcoin is legal in Russia. Other nations are as well. So there is an unprecedented adoption. I wanted to say this. Bitcoin is untested in an era of high inflation that we're moving into. Bitcoin has always only existed in the good times. When the markets have been strong, it's still outperformed everything, but it's only existed in the good times. So we don't really know how it's going to perform. Now, we saw Bitcoin perform in the black swan event of coronavirus. And what happened was it crashed. When all the other markets crashed, it recovered first and it recovered faster. It took just a matter of hours and days for the digital market to correct and recover, whereas it took the S&P 500 and Dow Jones, all of those, it took much longer for them to recover. And they never recovered to the point that they were, Bitcoin recovered its value. They never recovered. Some of the companies went to new highs and then they lost those highs again. Right now, many of those companies are 50% They've lost all the gains that they made since that crash, is what I want to say. They're back at the levels they were for the crash. Bitcoin has taken some hits, but it is still above where it was when it took that crash back in 2020. Regulations are uncertain. We want regulation. You want this to be regulated, but you don't want it to be stifled, and you want to stay competitive. So we don't know what that's going to mean. So you have to ask yourself these questions. Number one, do you believe in the technology? Do you believe that the world is going digital? Do you believe that blockchain technology is the future for many things, including the metaverse, including virtual realities, as well as digital currency? How much of whatever you put in are you willing to lose? And this is a big question. It's a very good question investors have to ask. It's called safe failure. How much can you lose and still be in the green? And I think this is a very important question that you need to ask yourself. You need to weigh the benefit against the real world events. Look at what's happening geopolitically. Look at what's happening economically. Look at what's happening politically. And ask yourself how you feel that the dollar is going to hold up and how you feel that digital currencies are going to hold up. Here's where I am on this. When I think about either putting my energy, my savings into US dollars, fiat dollars, nothing to back them, or precious metals, or digital currencies like Bitcoin, I think of it less as an investment and more of a conversion. What I'm doing is I'm taking my energy that I've received for a book or for a service or for a piece of music that I've created, whatever it is, and I'm simply converting it into another form of energy that I feel is going to be stable in the rough times that we all are in now, that we sense are on the horizon. So you have to ask yourself, are you comfortable simply doing the conversion to preserve the value of your energy, to preserve your wealth? Bitcoin cryptocurrencies are only going to be available if the internet is up and running. So if you feel that there's any chance that there could be disruption in the World Wide Web, I would take a portion, personally, of whatever it is. What I have done is take a portion and put it in something that doesn't rely on the World Wide Web, just to kind of hedge where you are. It never makes sense to put all your eggs in one basket. You never want to do that. I know that people that do, some of them have done really well, and some of them have been destroyed financially because of what are called black swan events, and things don't go the way they expect. So you have to use common sense. Use good common sense. So this is what I wanted to say. We've gone longer than I would typically go, but there was a lot of information, and I felt like it was worth taking the time to share these things with you. So I hope in answering these multiple questions that I have helped maybe you to understand a little bit better what are digital currencies, what is blockchain technology. Bitcoin exists within blockchain technology. What is it? What does it mean? What does it mean in your life? Where may it be going? And why is it important in our lives today? And if you and I have done that together, then we've done our work well. I'm going to thank you right now. I'm going to close this presentation. I just want to say thank you for sharing a part of your day with me today. And let me know if this was useful to you. And if you would like to know more about the other facets, deeper in the blockchain technology, into some of the other protocols that are out there, and if this is useful in your life. Thank you so much. I look forward to our next.